Welcome to Using Light from Quickpro Camera Guides. Photography can be very rewarding, and we hope you'll enjoy learning more about it with this DVD. We trust that you'll find it helpful and informative. As you may have noticed, taking great pictures doesn't always happen automatically. It's important to understand some fundamentals to help you capture great images. No matter what camera you're using, the fundamentals of photography stay the same. This DVD was created to teach you ways to use light to improve your photography. Before we get started, let's talk a little bit about the lighting tips card that came with your DVD. This card was designed to be a quick reference to keep in your camera bag to help you when you're out taking pictures. It will help you remember the things we'll be discussing today. Check the back of your card for coupon codes that can be used at quickproguides.com. This DVD will guide you through a variety of lighting situations with directions for how to get the most out of your light sources. We'll learn about white balance, outdoor light, indoor light, and using a flash. Lighting is a very powerful aspect of creating beautiful photographs. Light is always changing and can dramatically affect the outcome of your photos from moment to moment. When you know how to compensate for these changes, you'll have more success when you're out taking pictures. Photos can appear dramatically different based on colors of the light from different light sources. Even though white appears to be white to the human eye, your digital camera sees additional colors within that light. You'll need to adjust the camera's white balance settings to compensate for the different colors of light in your images. When is white not white? When it's mixed with any varying colors of light, which happens all the time. In digital photography, the results of that light may not always be pleasing. It's important for the camera to compensate for different colors of light to produce images that have correct coloring. In broad daylight, you might think that the light appears to be white, but it's actually bluish. Indoor light is often yellow, and fluorescent light often appears green in photos. So although that light appears white in your eye, you will want to make adjustments to the white balance settings on your camera to compensate for different colors and types of light. We'll use this photo to show the effects of proper and improper white balance for this image. Most digital cameras have an auto white balance setting. When this setting is used, the camera just guesses what the lighting conditions are and attempts to compensate accordingly. Sometimes auto white balance works great, and other times it doesn't work quite as well. As mentioned before, daylight is actually bluish in color. The camera's daylight white balance setting compensates for the blue color by adding warm tones to the image. Cloudy daylight is even bluer than daylight. The camera's cloudy white balance setting will compensate for the slightly more blue color of cloudy daylight by adding even more warm tones to the image. Shaded daylight has even more blue tones than cloudy daylight. The camera's shade white balance setting will compensate for the even bluer color of shaded daylight by adding even more warm tones. Light from incandescent lighting indoors, lamps, and light fixtures is typically a yellowish color. The camera's tungsten or incandescent white balance setting will compensate by adding some cooler tones. Fluorescent light is often green in color. The camera's fluorescent white balance setting will compensate by adding warm reddish tones to the image. The light from your camera's flash is fairly blue in color. It's very similar to daylight. The camera's flash white balance setting will compensate by adding warm tones to the image. Sometimes none of the preset white balance settings will produce an image with proper color. This happens most often in mixed lighting situations. To compensate for this, you'll want to set a custom white balance. It's different for each camera, so you'll want to check your camera's user manual for instructions. Today we'll be discussing ways to use natural light when we're taking pictures outdoors. We'll be exploring the differences in the direction and quality of light. As the sun travels across the sky, there are not only differences in the shape of the shadow, but also the intensity of the light. This is known as the quality of light. Quality of light refers to the brightness and how directly the light hits the subject. In direct sunlight, there is intense contrast between shadows and highlights. In shaded areas, the light is diffused and less direct, making shadows softer and less contrast between the highlights and shadows. The quality of light changes in predictable ways throughout the day. Just after sunrise and just before sunset, the light is much softer. At midday, the light is much more direct and harsh. Weather conditions can also influence the quality of light. Clouds will naturally diffuse and soften the sunlight. As we're outdoors taking pictures today, we'll learn about direct sunlight, full shade, open shade, and backlight. Each of these different lighting scenarios give the viewer a different impression of the subject. It's always important to consider the quality of light that your subject is best shown in. Make sure that the lighting fits with the message you're trying to send to the viewer. We'll be taking pictures today of Lauren, and we'll be watching the way that the light affects her face in each of the locations. Right now, we're in an area that has direct sunlight, and as you can see, the direct sunlight has created harsh shadows on her face, and there's intense contrast between the shadows and highlights. Generally, this type of lighting is not very flattering. There's so much contrast that it's difficult to see her eyes, and she's squinting so much that there are extra wrinkles in her face. Now we've moved to an area with open shade. We're just inside of a shaded area, but the sunlight is still very nearby, providing light that is warm and flattering. Most of the time when you're taking pictures of people, you want to find an area with softer light. Open shade is generally a great option. Since the light is softer, it's much easier to see the detail in the shadow areas, and the shape of the shadows is softer and more flattering. The softer light hides flaws and makes the skin appear smooth. In this photo, we can clearly see Lauren's eyes, which should always be the focal point of a portrait. Although the light in open shade is much more flattering than direct sunlight, there is one thing that we can do to make it even better. In shaded areas, there are often areas of the subject, like the side of Lauren's face, that are not very well lit. These areas can be filled in with light, and to do this, we'll use a reflector to bounce the light back onto the shadowed area. We'll position the reflector fairly close to Lauren with the sunlight falling directly onto it and bouncing back to her face. Now, I'm using a reflector stand today, but if you have an assistant, they can hold the reflector for you. The reflector did a great job of bringing light into the shadowed areas of her face. The light from the reflector is not harsh, but it still makes it easier to see the details in the shadow areas. Right now, the light in this location is great for our needs. However, at other times of the day, the light here will be direct sunlight. It's a good idea to scout a possible photography location to make sure that you're there when the lighting will be best to meet your needs. Generally, photographers like to work outdoors at specific times of day. Early mornings just after sunrise and evenings just before sunset are the times of day when the light is the softest and most desirable for photography. These times will have the best quality of light and allow for maximum detail in your photographs. Now we'll talk a little bit about backlight. Backlight is when there's a very strong light behind the subject and not enough light in front of the subject. This type of light will result in an unwanted silhouette, and all the detail in the subject's eyes and face will be lost. Also, backlighting can often cause lens flare. Lens flare is caused by light shining directly into the camera's lens, and it looks like bright circles of light in the photos. Now, there are a few ways that we can compensate for backlight. One of those ways is by using a flash. Light from a flash is often harsh and unflattering, much like direct sunlight, but commercial diffusers can help soften that light. Another way to compensate for a strong backlight is to adjust the exposure. Now, if the image is purposely overexposed, the shadowed areas will become visible and the highlights will become very bright. Any detail in the background may be lost, but the main subject will be properly exposed. To do this, we'll zoom in until Lauren's face fills the frame, and with her face filling the frame, we'll adjust the aperture and shutter speed until the light meter is balanced and indicates a proper exposure. With this new exposure setting, we'll now back up and recompose the shot, including all areas of the background that we want in the photo. The light meter will be indicating that we're overexposing the shot, but we'll ignore it. We know that we're only concerned with a portion of the image that will be properly exposed. Even though the background will be too bright, Lauren's face will be properly exposed. As you're out taking pictures, pay attention to the direction and quality of light. By using proper lighting techniques, you can make the subjects of your photographs appear more flattering, and you can greatly improve your image quality. In this segment, we'll be discussing indoor light. The location we'll be shooting in has large open windows and traditional light fixtures and lamps. First, we'll learn to use natural light from windows. Light from a window provides a soft, even light that is very flattering when you're taking pictures of people. Later, we'll use lamps to light our model and examine the differences between the two light sources. Natural light is also referred to as ambient or existing light. Indoors, window light is often soft and diffused. It can create smooth shadows that flow into even highlights that are not too bright. This kind of lighting helps hide flaws in the skin and is perfect for photographing people. Lauren will be helping us today as we learn about indoor light. When we're using window light, there are a few things to be careful of. Usually the difference between the amount of light inside the window and the light outside the window is too much for the camera to handle. Often the window itself will appear too bright, or the light outside the window will appear too dark. To get the best results, we're going to actually avoid including the window in our photo. We'll place Lauren close enough to the window that she can be illuminated, but not so close that the direct light falls on her. We'll set the camera angle so it's not looking directly out the window. We'll want to make sure that we're at an angle from the window. As we direct Lauren, we pay close attention to the light on her face, and we'll have her move closer to the window until we see smooth shadows and highlights. When you're taking pictures of friends and family, don't be afraid to have them move slightly until the light is most flattering. Most people do not know when the light is hitting them in the best way, and they'll have to rely on you to direct them. Now that we have Lauren seated near the window, we'll want to stand right about here. We're close enough to the window, but we're not blocking the light from falling on her. The window light is gently falling on Lauren's face, and it makes it soft and diffused. It makes her skin appear smooth and even. The highlights are bright enough to give life to her face, but not so bright that they lose detail. Likewise, the shadows are rich, dark areas with detail throughout. There are also plenty of midtones that blend shadows and highlights. The photo is nice, but there is one problem that is common when there's only one light source. The side of Lauren's face that is not toward the window has shadows that are a little too dark and have lost their detail. We'll want to fill in these areas with some light, and to do this we'll use a reflector. The reflector we're using today is a 48-inch commercial reflector with a stand. To use it, we've simply attached the reflector to the reflector stand to hold it in place. Reflectors come in a wide variety of shapes, sizes, and colors. The more reflective the surface is, the more light will be reflected into your shadows. Reflectors work by bouncing the light back into the shadowed areas. So in this case, the light will pass Lauren and fall on the reflector. As this happens, the light will bounce back toward her, illuminating the shadowed side of her face. The difference is easy to see by watching the shadows on Lauren's face as we position the reflector. We'll position the reflector so it's fairly close to Lauren, about 3 feet away. In order to get the right amount of light back into her face, we'll tilt the reflector back slightly. As we do this, we can see that Lauren's face is filled with light. Now with the shadow areas filled in with light, the image is much more intriguing. We no longer have deep shadows with little detail. The light from the reflector is warm, soft, and flattering. Now we're going to learn about using indoor light from ordinary lamps or light fixtures. Window light is much brighter than ordinary lamps, so as we're taking pictures in this scenario, we'll have much less light to work with. With the lower intensity of the lamp's light, we'll need to adjust the ISO setting of the camera to a higher number to make sure that the image will be properly exposed. For this location, in the amount of light that we're using with these lamps, we'll choose an ISO setting of 800. Now, the light in our images will be the most interesting if we control it as much as possible. We want to keep the light somewhat directional or coming from only one area. If the light bounces all around the room, it will light Lauren evenly from every direction and it won't be as visually interesting. We normally see light coming from above. The sun is in the sky, light fixtures are generally on the ceiling. Things look normal when lit from above. So for this reason, we'll want to place the light source above and slightly to the side of Lauren's face. Now, much like window light, reflectors can help bounce more light onto the subject to fill in shadowed areas. We'll want to photograph Lauren from the same side that the light is on, and this is called open lighting. It will show her with the light side of her face toward the camera. This kind of lighting is more inviting to the viewer and will help the viewer relate to Lauren better. When the camera's on the shadowed side of her face, it's called closed lighting and makes the model appear more mysterious. As you take control of your lighting, you'll learn to create a soft, even lighting situation that will be very flattering to your model. Using a flash is a challenging aspect of using light in photography. Today we're going to be photographing our model indoors with very little light, which will require us to use artificial light to properly expose our images. There are two types of flashes we're going to use today. The first is an onboard flash that's built right into the camera. With this type of flash, we're limited to the direction of the light. Also, the onboard flash is limited in power. An alternative to the onboard flash is the external flash. The external flash can be placed on the camera or on a light stand somewhere else in the room. The external flash is larger and will provide much more light than the onboard flash. With the onboard flash, the light will only be able to come from one direction. The flash is connected to the camera, so the light will always come from the same angle. Now, this type of lighting is called front lighting. Front lighting is flat and usually eliminates much of the detail that gives a subject its character. It fills in all of the shadowed areas with light and gives the image less depth, so they'll be difficult to see. As we take a few pictures of Lauren with the onboard flash, we'll see that the light is harsh and unflattering. We'll see that the direction and quality of the light make it difficult to see the smooth, even skin tones and the depth of her facial features. To help control the quality of light coming from the onboard flash, we can use a flash diffuser. A flash diffuser can look like this, or it can look completely different. All that matters is that it softens the light. Diffused light is much softer and more flattering when you're taking pictures of people. The diffuser made such a difference in the quality of light from the onboard flash. It made the highlights a little softer and the shadows a little more smooth. We can see detail in our highlight areas as well as our shadowed areas. Although the light is still very flat, the satin look of the skin is much more of what we're looking for. An external flash can be attached to the camera with the hot shoe or with a cord. Many external flashes can also be triggered wirelessly. When the flash doesn't have to be attached to the camera, it can be placed anywhere in the room, which will provide interesting and directional light. The external flash allows us to create a better angle for the light, but it can still be a harsh, unflattering light with the same quality as the onboard flash. An external flash can be diffused in the same way that we diffused an onboard flash. As we said earlier, diffused light is softer and more flattering when we're taking pictures of people. Another advantage of an external flash is that many of them can pivot and tilt so that they can be aimed toward a wall or ceiling. It's much more versatile than an onboard flash and will allow you to create a greater range of lighting situations. When a flash is directed toward a wall or a ceiling, the light will bounce off the surface and fall softly back onto the subject. Bounced light looks much more natural than direct flash because it comes from a similar direction and intensity as natural light. So let's take a few pictures. As we can see, the bounced light is much more flattering than the direct flash. It's softer and the extreme highlights and shadows are eliminated. Using your flash isn't always as easy as just switching it on and taking a picture. All flash units have a range. Flash range refers to the distance where your flash is the most effective. Most onboard flashes have a range of approximately 3.5 to 14 feet. Check your user manual to find the range for your flash. Let's take some pictures using our camera's onboard flash to show the importance of flash range. A great way to learn the limits of the flash's range is to experiment. Now, if we have Lauren stand a little too close to the camera, she'll be too bright or overexposed in the image. Now we'll have Lauren stand a little too far away from the camera and we'll take a few pictures. When the flash is too far away, Lauren will be too dark or underexposed in the image. In the first image, we can see that there is very little detail in Lauren's face because the flash was so bright and intense on her face. The second image has very little detail as well, but it's because the image is too dark and the flash didn't reach her face. Finally, we'll have Lauren stand at an appropriate distance from the camera and the onboard flash, and these images will be properly exposed with detail in the shadows and the highlights. This image has great exposure. The highlights are bright but do not lose detail, and the shadows are nice and dark but still rich with detail. By controlling the light source, the photographer has a lot of say in the outcome of the final image. Keep in mind the direction of light as well as the quality of light to achieve the look and feel you desire. Thanks for watching Quickpro's Using Light DVD. We hope you've enjoyed learning more about using light in photography. We know this new information will give you enough confidence and know-how to take your photography skills to new levels. If you'd like to learn more about your camera, be sure to check out Quickpro's camera-specific guides for digital SLRs. Visit quickproguides.com to see our full line of instructional DVDs and camera-specific tutorials. Remember to use your lighting tips card to help you when you're out taking pictures, and you can review any section of this DVD that is most helpful to you.